Favorite to see a father and son together, and he loved it.
Without a doubt, the most powerful African-American leader at the turn of the century was Booker T. Washington. And as founder of Tuskegee Institute, every year he was able to lead hundreds of black youths into the world, armed with his ideas about development and education. But getting an education, well, that hadn't been so easy for Booker T. As a slave child, it had been illegal for him to get educated. And one of the duties that he had as a slave was to carry the books of the white children when they went to school. He didn't mind this so much because it gave him a chance to look and discover what was in those books. And it also gave him a chance when he was at the school to peer through the window and watch the faces of the white children as they were so absorbed in what they were learning. He felt that if he could just get into a classroom like that himself, why, that would be next to paradise. And so I started with Booker T. Washington's birth, and Booker T. Washington's, his birthright and his education, how he survived. To start with is this. Booker T. Washington was born a slave on May 18, 1856, and from the moment of his birth, he was the legal property of James Burroughs. And for the next 9 years of his life, Washington lived with his mother and siblings on a squalid cabin on Burroughs' 260-acre farm. And so he was someone who was born into slavery just before the beginning of the Civil War, and who was a working-class person during his youth. He worked in coal mines in West Virginia, and he was a young person during Reconstruction. And by the summer of 1862, more than 100,000 Americans had been killed or wounded in the Civil War. Then in May 1862, with the exception of his cabinet, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. This proclamation liberated millions of blacks who had spent their years in bondage. And immediately after freedom, there was, as they said, a great hunger to learn to read and write, so that adult classes, as well as day classes and night classes, were widespread throughout the South. And Booker had a burning desire to learn to read and write. And one evening, to Booker's surprise, his mother presented him with a copy of a Webster spelling book. From then on, whenever he was at home, Booker could be found studying the alphabet. Booker's family moved to West Virginia, and he was sent to work in a nearby coal mine. And one day, while working in a mine, Booker overheard two men talking about the Hampton Agricultural Institute, a liberated black school in Virginia that prepared its students to become teachers. And Booker dreamed of going to this school. In June, Booker was ready to go to the Hampton Institute, and now the black community joined its support by collecting money for Booker's journey. At Hampton, Booker earned his education by working as janitor during his 3 years there. And then in June 1875, 19-year-old Washington was chosen to speak at the commencement exercises. And he believed that blacks needed to learn and survive in a country as free people. Blacks were only free in the South from 1865, that was 30 years, and he believed that industrial work would be appropriate for black advancement at that particular time. Washington returned home to Malden and began to teach in the black school of Tinkersville, which he himself had begun his educational career. By 1879, he was teaching more than 200 students. It was here that Washington met Fanny Smith, who would, years later, become his wife. In June 1881, Booker T. Washington was chosen to serve as principal at the new tuition-free black school in Tuskegee, Alabama, and gratefully accepted the challenge. And before that, Hampton was considered a model industrial school, and Washington was proud to be counting among its faculty. But you must understand, industrial work is very important in the early 20th century, because it was much better paid than moral work. And when you were industrial work in the North, you had the right to leave that employment and to go on strike, and you had a lot more ability to be autonomous as a worker. And so you had more autonomy as a worker, and you had better wages, and you had wages that were more likely to be paid. So industrial work was considered a much better situation in the early 19th to early 20th century. And then after that, Washington went to the Tuskegee Institute and Tuskegee, Alabama. And when he arrived in Tuskegee in June 24th, he discovered to his surprise that the school had not yet been built. No provisions were made by the state for the securing of land, building, or apparatus. Washington had to start from the ground up. He located a 100-acre farm, the Bowen property, which he and his students began to transform. And he was extraordinary because he began the Tuskegee Institute, and he laid the foundation for educational programs and for black advancement during that day and time. Washington and his students prepared the half-dozen wooden structures. Within a matter of days, the hen house and the stables were thoroughly cleaned. Then, with the exception of a few boards and a coat of paint, they returned to classrooms. And that is the first part of his life, how he started the Tuskegee Institute, how he was at Hampton and earned his education. And so we turn to the second part of his life, which is his turning point to being not only as a fine educator, but as a conservative spokesman for the black race. And anybody have time?
Yeah, I got time. Hey, you can keep talking. I got time. Hey, this is a history. This is a history. Where's your violin? What's your name? Say your name.
Max.
Max.
Lulich. L-U-L-I-C-H.
Max Lulich. Y'all remember Max Lulich?
L-U-L-I-C-H.
He's a testament to our history.
And this is my
and Booker T. Washington Perry. Hey. Perry and Mom, we're going to have to find out what you feeding them, because I'm going to get my son some of that real soon.
And I'm preparing W.E.B. Du Bois, too.
All right, we look forward to that. I'm going to make you a copy of this, okay?
This is his honorarium for Mosque that Max gave.
Allah Akbar. We're going to remember you in our prayers.
Right.
Okay?
We're going to try to get him to the convention. Well, Mama said